And I'm curious what you think is the current state of influencers after spending so much money with so many different influencers and content creators, and where we're going in the next 5 years.
Yeah. So, uh, I wish I would have spent money on YouTube sooner, right? And if people look at like the breakdowns, right, like there was like the pre-mainstream era, which is like the like the first time people coming online. You call that for like 2008 to 2012 or 13 or 14, right? Like when AdSense was still really new, like it would have been awesome to sponsor people back then because I think you would have made a fuck ton of money, right? It just like you would have been the only sponsor, and you could have paid very very low CPMS. And then we rode, you know, we sponsored probably over 5,000 YouTubers at this point, and
5,000 YouTubers. Wow.
yeah, probably over 5,000
How
individual
many
channels.
companies can say that?
I mean, Squarespace, they sponsor everybody.
That's great.
Audible, they're sponsoring everybody.
True.
But so we've I think that strategy really peaked 2017, 2018, 2019. We kept sponsoring aggressively throughout the first part of COVID. Around the second half of 2021 and 2022, that's when things really fell apart, where like when it fell apart for me, I bet it was great for influencers. You end up having crypto companies come in. You end up having just like a ton of VC dollars pour in, and if you're a crypto company, you can't really spend money on Facebook very effectively, right, or at all. So they were just fucking up the market, right, where FTX would give people $1,000 CPMS. They'd be like, just promote my thing. We now know that they were stealing customers' funds to buy those ads, right? But yeah, they definitely fucked it up. So we just kept our core group of people going through 2022, and now this year, really the second half of last year, a lot of big sponsors pulled out. Like we were at VidCon. I was at VidCon in 2022, which is in July, and like I remember being pulled to the side by one of the very large boxing YouTubers managers once a and they're like, "Hey, dude, people are pulling out. Like, will you lock in spots?" And we end up locking spots in with a ton of people because we have consistent dollars, but they're lower, right? It's the same thing with Facebook ads. It's like I buy consistently, and I just benefit when CPMS are lower. So anyway, we will pay less than everybody, but we'll always pay you, right? So anyway, that kind of fell apart, and there was like a 12-month or 18-month window where the ecosystem was very perverted because of just dollars coming in. It's definitely getting a lot better, but where is it going? I think that's a more interesting question, right? Long form content on YouTube has been declining for a long time. Obviously, YouTube as a platform is continuing to grow, but the growth is slower than the channel growth, right? So the average long form video is getting less views. It used to be in 2017, we'd sponsor a dozen people, and half those videos would get 1 million views, right? There was a more of a concentration of views on content, and because of TikTok has created for you content, right? Hyper personalized content, and YouTube is mimicking that, right? If I pull up my YouTube like home feed right now, I bet none of the videos have more than 2,000 or maybe 5,000 views, right? Now, there are people that break this exception, right? Like, Mr. Beast. And that's where I think YouTube is falling into two different, poles. There's very large blockbuster entertainment, right? And that is the Mr. Beast of the world, or you could put Ryan Trahan, or you could put, maybe Emma Chamberlain, like people who will consistently get millions of views. Mr. Beast obviously gets 100 million. He's way out here. And then 80% of it is people getting 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 people who do not break into the mainstream, and it's because of personalized for you content. So that's where currently, the bifurcation is. I think we'll see more of this landscape going forward. There's going to be more channels eking out a living at 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 like views. And there's going to be less of like the mega channels. It's just hard to be a mega star, right? The Jake Pauls, the Logan Pauls, the old mega stars. More of them are not coming up.
So what should somebody listening to this as a content creator who's maybe in their first year of creating stuff, what should they think about, and what should they do if they hear that?
Well, level set. Do you want to be famous, right? Like that's something where like I look at Colin and Samir, right? Colin and Samir, my favorite channel. Right?
Me too. I love Colin and Samir. Shout out Colin and Samir.
Yeah. They have 1 million subs, right? They have Creator Sport as a podcast, right? They make it's niche content, right? Like I listen to it, you listen to it because we love this thing, right? But 14-year-olds who like Fortnite don't want to watch that, right? Or like my wife's a bad example because she's a content creator, but go on the street and ask people if they're interested. They'd be like, "This is so boring. Why would I want to listen to an interview with Mr. Beast or whatever?" They'd be like, "I don't care," and that's the difference. Is do you want to be like generally liked and regarded for who you are or whatever, or are you okay being like a niche content creator? Because you can make a crazy living. I have a podcast that gets no fucking views, and sponsors give us $100,000, right? Like, I shouldn't say it has no views. It has 2,000 views. We're very proud of those, right? But so you can make a decent living as like a very, targeted, industry specific, talking about what you're an expert in. But like, no one's stopping me on the street. Like nobody cares who I am.
You probably just don't get out enough.
Nah, yeah, no. But Mr. Beast, right, or any of those large, like they're famous for who they are, right? Like general fame or whatever. That's definitely a curse, but so figure out what you actually want on that spectrum, right? Like the world needs content. The world loves content. Like and it could be educational, it could be entertainment, it could be whatever. But figure out where you want to be on that path. But generally speaking, if you are creating just entertainment content for the masses on YouTube, it is very hard right now to go from a 50,000 sub creator to a 5 million sub creator. There's so few examples of that happening post COVID, like a handful, right? And that's just and it used to be there was so much growth in sub count, in the 2010s era. That's just mostly gone as content has become more personalized.
It's interesting looking at somebody like even Andrew Schultz, who has said before, like, he'll get stopped and someone will come up to him and be like, "Holy shit, it's Andrew Schultz." And the person next to him, who that person's friend, will have no idea who Andrew is. And I think that speaks to the for you nature of it. Is like, to me, Andrew Schultz is like the biggest comedian in the world. But to somebody else who likes comedy, Andrew Schultz might not even exist in some way. And that's an interesting thing. What does that mean for society when we're living in completely different realities?
Yeah. I mean, there's the lack of cultural milestones, right? Who is the last celebrity everybody knows, right? I mean, it's going to be somebody from Marvel or, maybe Zendaya and Tom Holland, like,
Kim Kardashian?
Yeah. Like, and there's fewer true celebrities than there've ever been, right? Like they're still putting Matt Damon and fucking Brad Pitt in movies. Those guys are like 50 or 60 years old, right? But like, and Tom Cruise is still fucking like, and it's because he's 60 years old, and like it's because people recognize him, right? And there is less of that going forward. And you have to think about like every generation has cultural milestones, and like what are the next ones going to be when it is a hyper fragmented world, right? Where the content I consume today is totally different than the content you consume, right?
Not that different.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, we but obviously, like if you're looking at demos, it's like, oh yeah, two entrepreneur guys who are 28 or 29 living in Austin. It's like our For You pages should be exactly perfect, because 30 years ago we would watch the same movies, we'd read the same books, we'd talk about the same things.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a huge benefit to it that doesn't often get discussed, in that even though we're similar archetypes but have different For You pages and are consuming different content, means we're getting better in slightly different ways. Like you might be going deep on e-com stuff, I might be listening to podcast stuff, and that difference of content that we're consuming makes us better in the ways that we want to be better, which as a whole makes society better. Think about like the kid who could only watch YouTube videos of like Sports Center, but now this kid can watch basketball highlights or soccer highlights and watch them on repeat. That kid is going to be so much better from watching that content.
Yeah, that is a very positive and productive way to look at it. Or they're just watching dance videos or whatever, right? Or memes or Subway Surfer with somebody cutting, balloons up or whatever, right? But yeah, no. I think that is a very interesting observation. Going to the cultural milestones, it's like, look, the JFK assassination, landing on the moon. I'm sure there's some shit for the Vietnam War or whatever, but then we have 9/11, and then I think the last one that I think is super culturally relevant for everybody is like, and maybe not so, but I remember where I was in 2016 when Trump got elected. It's like, yeah, those are like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any. I mean, maybe
COVID.
Yeah, like where you were when COVID happened.
When
right?
the NBA announced that they were going to stop playing games. To me, that was like a big moment.
That is the moment I remember too. So I guess it's that, and then yeah. So then I guess there's still cultural milestones, but look, every generation says that like the next one's gonna be fucked. So
And we've been fine.
Yeah.
So we're going to be fine.
but going back to like, if you're a consumer brand who wants to sponsor influencers, I think it's a very difficult time. And like you might be better off just doing paid media, because like at the end of the day you're buying CPMs, and a CPMs, as views are lower across the board, it is harder to find deals that make sense. Like, look, we'll sign 300 deals this month, right? So like we're still finding deals that make sense, but there are less of them, and they're harder to come by than they used to be. So that's the brand side for influencer. And then if you're a content creator who wants to be an influencer or whatever else, I mean, there's probably more ways to monetize that than ever before, right? Like you should build audience so that you can launch a product or business or service or whatever, and like you have people who want to support you and help you.
Yeah, that's good advice. What do you look for in those 300 deals? What are you looking for when you're sponsoring somebody?
Yeah, I mean, what we look for is demos, view count, cost. Like we are the least strategic when it comes to picking deals, right? Like some people are like, oh, that's our image, or like that person represents us. My wife is sponsored by Lululemon, so every month she has to post like 1 or 2 videos from Lululemon, right? They pay a ridiculous amount of money for her posts, right? Like it doesn't make any financial sense, right? Like I don't know why they're doing this, but someone at Lululemon is like, oh, like this is the type of person we want posting, so like we need them to post. That's one end of the spectrum, and then there's us. That's like, oh, they agreed to do it for $100. Great, yeah, let's just do that, right? So, look, other brands fall somewhere in between that, right? If you're more of a fashion brand, maybe you have an aesthetic or image you want to, really get across on your social media presence. Like that's probably closer to Lululemon, and then maybe you're, a little scrappier. You're a little more like us. So there's a whole spectrum there.